Have you ever met someone inherently evil? The wife of my old boss. She would come late into work angry and drunk, parking her Mercedes across 2 spaces, and demand everyone drop everything to help her fix some trivial issue. If anyone had anything more pressing to get on with, she would fly off the handle screaming about how it was her fucking company. Then my boss died and she was left in charge. She buried her head in the sand and would scream and cry about how she wanted to take her own life whenever anyone asked her to do anything important like sign bank paperwork or bring someone in to help. She did not let any of his family attend the funeral and went into detail in the eulogy about how they got together through an affair and how people getting hurt was necessary. Then when someone at the company who had been there by the boss' side since the beginning was diagnosed with lung cancer, she said, and I quote, "I wish he would hurry up and pass away so I would not have to give him any more sick pay." Then the business went under and we all got made redundant via email. No idea what happened to her. She lived by herself and had no contact with anyone, burned every single bridge she had, even with her neighbors. I do not believe in karma in the spiritual sense, but I definitely feel like she is living her punishment for being so vile. My uncle, father's brother. I am adopted, and during my whole childhood my mother tried shielding me from this man by keeping me away, but was kind enough not to speak too badly of him. She told me he loved us but was just a closed-off person. When growing up, I learned how twisted he was. Once my grandmother died, he tried taking over my dad's part of the inheritance. He worked overtime for my father to divorce my mom, and once she passed away, he tried, along with his wife, to force my dad into changing his will to suit himself. Once my dad got ill and I had to hospitalize him, he made a false complaint against me, saying I abused my elderly helpless father into starvation. All because I was not blood and a person of color. I was very close to spending years in prison for pure pettiness. And to top things off, he spread a rumor during my dad's funeral about me abducting my dad and keeping them apart. Yeah, that is him. I worked briefly with a psychologist whose clients were sex offenders. Their therapy was mandatory. Most almost seemed like normal guys but a little off. But one would give me the chills just entering the room. I could feel him before I could see him. He made me so uncomfortable. There was the lobby and the reception area where I sat. My area was behind a security door that had to be buzzed open and there was one of those partitions with a few slots for paperwork, etc., but the clients could not access me unless I buzzed them in. This guy would sit across the lobby, the chair farthest from my area, and just stare at me, rubbing his palms on his knees. He never said more than a few words to me. After a few months of this, I told my boss that I could not stand it anymore. I started feeling really paranoid and afraid of walking to my car or being followed or something, and when I said that, my boss became very serious and asked me if I had seen the client outside of the office, anywhere at all, even just for a second. Turns out that client had been stalking and abusing women since the 80s and I was his type. My sister. She has stolen hundreds, if not thousands, of pain pills from my grandmother and my mom, hundreds of dollars from everyone she knows, and several things from numerous stores like Walmart or Dollar General. She is a habitual lying sociopath who cares about no one but herself. If she was thirsty, she would sell both her kids for a drink. I could say more, but I am tired and trying to remember every single bad thing she did would take me at least an hour, if not longer. I try to see the good in people. When I hear of people taking someone's life or stealing and everything else, I try to see it from their point of view. I genuinely wish we could all do and be better people. If she dropped dead right now, I would absolutely not shed a single tear. I would not be happy she is gone, but at the same time, the world would be a better place if she was not in it. Yes, the teacher I had in the 80s and 90s was a truly evil person. When I was in her class, she behaved super sweetly to this poor boy who had just had to repeat 3rd grade and was understandably awkward when joining us, and would send him out of the classroom to run errands for her as though it were a special privilege. Whenever he left the room, she would read his assignments aloud to the class and make jokes about his mistakes. Then when she heard footsteps, she would remind us all that what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. Of course I whistle blew and told both my parents and the school administration. The result was no consequences for her, but I started getting sent out on errands, or in my case, not actually going and instead staying within earshot to eavesdrop. When I was gone, she would remind everyone that I took what was in the classroom to others and could not be trusted, and that no one should ever trust me. A few years later, My mom was student teaching and walked past the teacher's door to hear her telling the class not to trust another student for betraying them by telling their parents what happened in class. Just an awful, evil woman. I used to manage a Staples copy center. We had an idiot general manager who lied her way into the position, and it showed. Eventually, the regional manager decided we needed to get rid of her and put a new general manager in place. He decided to move one of his other general managers from another store to ours. My store was one of the highest profit stores in the company because our commercial rent was locked very close to the original rent from when the building was built. We are talking about needing to be open for 2 days to cover the bills for the whole month. The new manager came in and decided he wanted a fresh start and more profit, and launched an internal investigation claiming widespread employee theft. He had friends in loss prevention and convinced them to find anything they could on everyone in the store. Everyone except the 2 assistant managers was fired and blacklisted from ever being employed by Staples again. I would later find out that the guy was a former cop who had been fired for unethical conduct. I did not just find out about this passively. One of his former officers who was a member at my MMA gym made a point of telling me about it and said, "Stay the fuck away from him, you can't trust anything he says or does." I ended up making it my personal campaign to get him removed from the company. He was finally removed, but I am still blacklisted. My grandfather never talked much about Vietnam, but he told my mom a story about a guy he was there with who he thought was pure evil. He was afraid the man would return to the States and keep taking lives because he genuinely enjoyed it. One day, while they were walking outside a village, the guy suddenly shot a young person. They had not even looked his way or said a word. It happened completely out of nowhere. The man outranked him, and he was too afraid to speak up, something he regretted for the rest of his life. He said he would see that person every time he closed his eyes at night, and that continued all the way until he died in his mid-70s. I went to pick up a takeout order at a restaurant/bar near me. I walked inside and there was a guy standing by the door also waiting for his takeout order. He never said a word, just stared at me the entire time he was waiting. My gut told me I was unsafe. The cashier gave him his food and he stood there for a minute or two, like he was thinking of a reason to stall. He asked the cashier for another order of wings. I texted my husband and asked if he could pick me up because this guy was giving me the creeps. As soon as my husband arrived, the creepy guy said, "Actually I think I'm fine with a dozen, you guys enjoy those wings," and he left. I get the chills thinking about how I could have potentially been mugged or worse if I did not listen to my gut that night. There was this guy who grew up on the neighboring street from me, and he was just a really, really bad person. It probably does not sound like much now, but when he was about 11 he would do things like borrow video games, never give them back, and then swear blind he never borrowed them in the first place. This sounds minor, but it kind of went from there really. As he got older he started to steal money, beat people up for no reason, etc. His ex-girlfriend took out a restraining order on him after they broke up because she was frightened of him. The best example I can give of what he was like was when he heard that someone had said something about him that he took offense to. The person who did this was in the pub one afternoon with his wife and kids, and this guy walked into the pub, did not say a word, and just headbutted him in front of his family. But at the same time, he could be quite well-spoken and charming when he wanted something from somebody, and it has only recently occurred to me that he is obviously a sociopath. He is now living in a tent and addicted to heroin, and I think it was always going to go that way. Years ago I was working on a mural project with a nonprofit. Part of the gig was 1 day a week to teach 7 to 12-year-olds art. There was an 8 to 10-year-old brother and sister in one group. The brother bullied the sister mercilessly, and no other kid would get near him. They all knew he was trouble. We separated the two, but once our backs were turned, he was right back mistreating her. The last straw was when he took a newly sharpened pencil and seriously hurt her hand. There was screaming, crying, red liquid everywhere. They called the parents, but I insisted on her being taken to the hospital as the pencil had badly injured her hand. The brother had no remorse and even a smirk on his face. His eyes were very dark and dead-looking, like in shows where they show a picture of a killer and people describe them as dead-eyed. The ambulance came as the parents arrived. This was clearly not the first time something like this had happened. Because they did not complete the activity, the nonprofit wanted the two back the next week. I flat out refused, which caused a big deal. I put my foot down and would not relent. I told them that kid needs help, and so does the sister. Later on, the coordinator told me that the year before they had to take away his drawings because they were disturbing. Like, How many warning signs do you need? That kid needs help. In high school I helped my friend babysit a group of kids for a local church. The adults were doing some kind of Bible study and there were about 6 or 7 children between the two of us babysitters. The main couple that was heading the group were the pastors of the church. The husband seemed a little weird but mostly gave off pushover vibes, whereas the wife immediately made me feel uneasy. Something about her seemed off, as if she was present but not fully aware of others. It was almost as though she would be saying and doing everything in the exact same wooden way with or without anyone else there. This couple had 3 adopted kids and one was a 5-year-old Russian boy that the mom literally referred to as the orphan a few times. She told my friend and me very blankly how we could not give in to his demands because he had little orphan boy syndrome, so we were not to give him any snacks or privileges when he asked. This little boy definitely had some psychological and possibly developmental issues, but was honestly one of the more endearing kids in that group and was nowhere near as creepy as the mom or the other 2 siblings made him out to be. The other 2 kept him at a distance and would not directly speak to him, but would talk to us to communicate with him, like staring me down with tunnel vision and telling me Victor needs to stop playing with his napkin, as Victor was right next to them trying to tell them something and waving his napkin at them. When the parents finished their Bible study, the dad came back in first and played with the kids, including the Russian one, and he seemed like a genuinely kind person that loved the kids. Then when the mom entered the room, the entire dynamic shifted and the dad and 2 kids stopped interacting with the Russian kid and became much more formal, and the mom immediately began lecturing my friend and me about how the Russian kid was not to be playing with his sister's Legos. She said something to my friend about how, this is the burden God has given this family and we must follow through with it now. This poor little kid definitely seemed to have issues, but the mom struck me as being an insidiously sadistic and abusive person. The way her voice never changed tone and her facial and bodily expressions and movements never wavered gave me the biggest case of the creeps. I wish my friend and I would have known better then and had reported this to CPS. I have always had a bad feeling about the situation and wish I would have acted better to help those poor kids. The mom seemed like she could have strangled one of them and then calmly kept making dinner as if absolutely nothing had just happened. This kid at my music camp when I was in middle school, he did not really talk to anyone and always played his cello very aggressively. Rumor had it that he kicked a girl in the mouth for taking his pencil. That kind of kid. Fast forward a few days, and I am hanging out with my 2 friends at the waterfront, and we see him throwing rocks at something. We ask what he is doing, and he tells us that he is trying to knock a turtle off of a log. A few tries later, he hits it in the head, and it falls off. That same day, he went up to a bunch of girls who found a tiny toad in the sand and asked to hold it. He apparently tried to crush it, but they took it back. The next day, he is at the waterfront again, poking something with a stick. My friends and I investigate, and he is poking a snake. I knew that it was poisonous, so I told him to stop, but he hit me in the arm. A counselor ran over to break it up, but understandably forgot about the whole thing when he saw the snake and just got us safely away from it. Yes, a former patient of mine. I am not squeamish, at all, but that guy creeped me out. There was always a feeling of unease, of lurking danger. He did not stare or do anything conventionally creepy. He was so ill he could not move without assistance. Just that feeling, and it was worst when he finally died. I have seen my fair share of lifeless bodies. Back then I worked with very old folks. Not with this guy, oh no. It was pure discomfort, hitting you in the face. A kind of appalling wrongness and overwhelming feeling that this guy was not going to a nice place. I almost believe that was hell looking at him, and I am an atheist. What I found out a week later was almost relieving. He had presumably taken the life of his own baby boy, because he was in the way. The older boy was not so much of a burden, but he gave him into a children's home for 2 years, all because he wanted to build a house in peace. His wife was in another ward at the same time, suffering from dementia, and she walked around all day with a little puppet you were not allowed to touch, crying most of the time. His living son was at her side as much as he could be. He told us all of this. He said his mother had that puppet for years, always searching for his little brother. He told us he was just so glad that his father was dead. He never used father or dad, but the man's full name. He and his mother had lived in pure torture, yet he could not leave her alone with him. He did not even want to see him or anything. My ex-wife's mother was a real-life nurse ratched. Same reptilian mannerisms, same condescending voice, same hair even. It was uncanny valley kind of stuff, because she was even a psychiatric nurse. Her own children told her, right before surgery to remove a golf ball-sized brain tumor, that if she wanted to make any changes to her personality, now was the time. They would blame all her prior shenanigans on the tumor. To absolutely no one's surprise, she came out of the surgery with her switch still flipped to evil. She spent the entirety of my relationship with my ex trying to break us up, and for all I know, she succeeded. Every time she looked at me, it was like she had just scraped me off the bottom of her shoe. When her own mother complained about the car doing funny things while she was driving, she decided her mother was just going senile and imagining things, and took away her driving privileges, and therefore her last remaining vestige of independence. Well, my ex and I discovered, around a year later, a puddle of transmission fluid on the garage floor of her grandmother's house. Turns out the transmission had been slipping. Her grandmother died 3 years later. She changed the date of her daughter's and my wedding around so many times that no one from my family was able to attend. One agreed-upon date was particularly objectionable, because Sundays are not for getting married, they are for going to church. One of the best outcomes of my ex leaving me is that I will never have to see discount nurse Ratched again for the rest of my life. Working in a prison several years ago, I met a lot of men who might be considered evil to you, but the fact is very few are inherently evil. But one young man was so manipulative and calculating his family stopped being his victim. When I first met him, I thought he was a funny, if misguided, young man with potential for being released and never coming back. I placed him in appropriate rehabilitative programs that he completed with high reviews. But like most people who were fooled by this guy, it was his ability to say what you wanted to hear, and not true change, that he mastered. Originally incarcerated for drug offenses and armed robbery of his younger brother's business, the completion of a certain intensive cognitive behavioral therapy program knocked 2 years from his time to serve. No one in his immediate family would have him stay with them, but in the state where I was working at the time, an offender could not be released without approved residence. It could be a spot on someone's floor, but it had to be approved. This is getting long, so let's fast forward. The man's elderly grandmother called offering a place to stay. It was ideal since she had plenty of room and was close to transportation and employment opportunities for him. We spoke by phone a few times to ensure she was ready. But within 2 weeks, he violated parole by using drugs, associating with felons, committing assault against the same brother he had wronged previously, stealing from his grandmother's home and garage, etc., resulting in county jail and returning to prison. This time he was ineligible for most programs, but of course he blamed me and the system instead of taking responsibility. When his release approached, every member of his family denied him a place to stay, and his poor grandmother was heartbroken that she could not trust him. She called begging that we not give him her new address and phone number. He has since returned to prison in a neighboring state with a long time before he is eligible for release. Please do not get me wrong. I know many people who were released and have done well with the proper help and determination. But when someone acts against those who love him most, again and again, with little if any remorse, evil plays a part. Not as some vile entity, but as a mindset. My former friend's mom. She drinks all day, spends her husband's money, and is a selfish narcissist. She injured her leg years ago working at a troubled youth clinic. A bad kid attacked her for no reason. But the more I grew to know her and saw how cruel she was, I believe she said something very hurtful and is also milking government money with her injury. My friend's boyfriend suffered a freak accident and almost died. While he was in the hospital, they got a dog to help him with his recovery. Fast forward to them breaking up, he kept the dog and she traveled the country for a few months. They were still friendly. He asked her to watch his dog while family, with an aggressive dog, came to visit. She agreed. Then the mom refused to give the dog back. She was now living with the mom post-breakup. It was not in his name, so he had no merit to get the dog back, besides massive court fees. She took a stroke survivor support dog from him. I felt so bad for him. He talked with attorneys and they said they could get the dog back for sure, but it would be pricey and she would be vengeful. He ended up having to get another dog. Former coworker. She simply could not see how her actions negatively affected others, and did things only to serve herself. Some highlights. She was getting new furniture, so she had her cat put down so it would not ruin it. She abandoned her husband, kids, and job on a whim, and drove with a friend to live and work about 20 hours away. After 6 months, she came back and did not understand why she could not have her job back and why her husband wanted to divorce her. She would routinely blame things that went wrong on job sites on people that had nothing to do with it. She would completely make up stories, and I got in trouble at work a few times because she blamed me for things I did not do. Building on that one, she would spread rumors and even report scandalous things to human resources that did not actually happen. This led to a coworker being fired before she admitted to making it up. She would routinely say she was going for a coffee run and take over an hour. She was once caught shopping at a sex shop during this time. A woman who is my grandmother, but I refuse to speak to her or call her that name. Instead, she gets the first name treatment. She did not have a high school education and lived off my grandfather's paychecks and military benefits. As they got older, she wanted to move to a nearby town on a lake. There was some apprehension to the idea, and then miraculously, there was a fire in their old home. This forced their hand and they made the move to a new home that my grandfather purchased. She decided to get a part-time job because she was bored, but since she had no driver's license, family members would take turns driving her to work. While there, a seasonal office job just checking people in, she met a wealthy guy. They began having an affair, and it destroyed my grandfather. She eventually left my grandfather, but not before having her new boyfriend threaten him multiple times, pick her up from the home, etc. Keep in mind, this woman was in her late 60s at this point. The guy saw me there doing some yard work once and asked if I was there to do my grandpa's dirty work of fighting him. What the fuck? The dude was in his late 60s and I was in my 20s. I had enough of his antics, threatening my grandfather with a knife and generally cussing him out. I approached his truck. He rolled up the window, and I punched his window out. I let him know that he was no longer to be seen on that property. He called the cops. I lied and said that never happened and offered to meet with the officer who called me to speak further. The officer said it was not necessary and let it go. Never heard a thing about that again. After divorcing my grandfather and getting his money and benefits, she moved to another state. He died about a year later, alone, heartbroken, and in incredibly poor shape. Her manipulation killed him. She was exiled from the family, no longer able to see her grandchildren or now great-grandchildren. I cannot wait for the day that woman is put in the dirt. If there is a hell, she deserves to be there.